Good morning once again. Very glad to see so many wonderful faces here today. Today's lesson is called How to Speak Unity. There's a tiny little book called How to Speak Unity. I chose this subject because it has come to my attention that really there's quite a few people here that are new to unity, and I had not noticed because I myself, this is my first year here, so I really had no way of knowing how new people were. But a couple of things brought that to my attention. The first one was that all the groups that we have together, the Let's Get Metaphysical, the book study, the dinner clubs, the potlucks, all these things, I started getting to know people and it became more obvious. And the second one was when Alice G went on her road trip recently, and she came back. You know, she's one of the founders of Unity Georgetown, and she came back and said, wow, there's so many new faces here. I said, yeah, there are. And that's a great thing, but it made me wonder just how familiar people are with unity, because we do have a unique way of seeing spirituality. And what better way to remedy all this is just to talk more about it. So if you are new to unity, you probably are not familiar with that book. And it's a really good little starter book, or maybe a gift for someone who, you know, you've been conversing with, and a family member said, well, what do you all do over there? How do you see things? And so it's just we just tend to really forget sometimes. I get these little reminders of just how different we are. But anytime you go to any kind of a traditional setting, you are quickly reminded how different we truly are. Anyway, so what we're doing here is bonding, and I keep saying about that. I'm trying to create a cohesive consciousness where we all really are kind of on the same page as much as we possibly can. So a few years ago, the Australian beer company Foster's ran some commercials about their beer. And the ad was called How to Speak Australian. And there was one in particular, it was in the 90s, it's been a while. And I remember one that there's a guy at a bar, and he's still got, you know, the phone's connected to the wall, and he's on the other side of the bar. And he's standing there saying, no, you hang up. And no, you hang up. No, you hang up. So obviously with some new friend of his, and the bartender comes over with some scissors and cuts the wire, and he says, How to Speak Australian, wireless. So I don't know, but when I saw this book, you know, I said, one of these days I'm going to do a lesson when I go somewhere new, to just kind of, again, for the sake of creating that cohesiveness. Now, the format of the book is that it covers a bunch of different topics in just a couple of paragraphs or so, really. I mean, as a matter of fact, there's 79 topics, from God to evil, judgment, Jesus, immortality, cause and effect, heaven and hell, the Bible, on, and just short little things. Obviously, I can't go over all of them today, but I'm going to try to cover a few of them the biggies, I guess, so we can just kind of remind ourselves what a unique model. It's a model, a unique model of the universe that we have. I really like unity because, to me, it is truly universal the way it is set up. And this is something that I have always felt is essential for any spirituality. It's got to be about everyone. It has to be. And, as I like to add to that, not only to everyone who lives, but everyone who has ever lived or ever will live on this or any other planet, on this or any other universe. I mean, the subject is God, after all. It's got to be that big, and it's got to cover all these bases. And the only way we can really do this is to speak from a conceptual level, let's say, because that integrates all the different models. And on top of that, it must be an open model. Now, by open, I mean that you are aware of the idea that because we are continually expanding our consciousness, each and every one of us, every day, with every new experience, with every new thing that we do, we expand our awareness. And as we do, then our spirituality must also expand with that. So that open model is essential. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore said that we are always living our consciousness. And of course, you think about that statement, and how else can it be? Of course we're always living our consciousness. What else could we be living? So for a lot of people, and I know that one of the new persons said that people have outgrown the old model, the old story. And that brings me to the perfect segue for today's first topic, which will be God. I want to start with something easy. Philosophical question number 1. What is the nature of God? Perhaps we can be bold. I like to be bold. And take a step backwards and ask the question, well, is there a God in the first place? Now, that's certainly a strange question to be asking at a Sunday morning spiritual service. Is there a God? But it speaks volumes of our willingness to be open to new ideas and how things are. And as I've noted before, there are more and more people who are beginning to identify as nuns. And we've talked about that at the Let's Get Metaphysical class. Nun, if you're not aware with the word, is not the nun with the not that nun, but a N-O-N-E, nun. So when you fill out an application or something, it says, religious affiliation, none of the above, none. So that's what a nun is. And these people have outgrown the story, and they just have not found anything to replace it with. And I think that's where unity comes in. Because the basic disconnect is this: we are hardwired to be spiritual. Psychologically, we're beginning to understand that this is so. And why? Because, as we say in Unity, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Of course we're hardwired to be spiritual. That's what we are at our core. But that doesn't jive with the story that we were told growing up. And that's why you're here and not somewhere else this morning. And, of course, there's some people who think that there is, every time I run into an atheist, they always tell me something like, well, I don't believe in God. And I tell them, well, the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. So maybe that's helpful to you. So where's a good place to start with God anyway? I'd like to start where, how do you define God? How do you define God? And so that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It just means we have to find a new understanding of what God is. And one way sometimes to figure out something is to figure out what it is not. And I know what God is not. God is not this being, supreme or otherwise. Because if God is a being, no matter how big, then God has parameters and God has characteristics. That makes God something with something and somewhere. None of that makes any sense, especially given that the Bible itself tells us that God is love and God is spirit, and we must worship in spirit. So, not sure where the man up above idea came from, but it is certainly pretty far off track from my understanding of spirituality. And that's a funny thing. How many times have we heard that phrase, the man up above? And just think about it. Just that one short little statement is saying that there is something somewhere. The man up above. So it's a guy and it's up there somewhere. And we in Unity have a much more like an Eastern view, in part, of God. One in which, like Meister Eckhart, who says, God is beingness itself. Beingness itself. Now, I say in part because in Unity we say that God is principle, but we also say that God is personal. And that is principle and personal, immanent and transcendent. It's called panentheism. How does this work? Well, principle means that it is conceptual, universal, unvarying, and applies to everything without exception, like mathematics. 2 plus 2 equals 4 to a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Hindu, or even an alien. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Mathematics doesn't care what you believe. If you arrive at the wrong answer, then you are wrong, period. It is you who are in error, not the principle. And furthermore, it is you who must correct the error. That is your responsibility. God's principle is not a concept addressed by tradition, normally speaking. They don't really talk about that, even though it is in Scripture. Now, you might ask, where in Scripture is it? And I do love your curiosity. Thanks for asking that question. It is found in Matthew, and it says, "For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain to the just and the unjust." To me, that says God has no favorites, not even the Christian people, who, by the way, didn't exist when all this happened. They were all Jews. I don't know if you've ever thought about that. Everybody in the Bible is a Jew. There are no Christians yet. But anyway, now what about God as personal? Sometimes we get criticized. We say, yeah, you all talk about all this stuff, but you don't have a personal God. I said, we don't have a personal God? How can you get more personal than God manifesting through us as us? That we are an expression of that, whatever it is, ness. So let's talk about judgment, because these are the topics, just different topics. Does God judge us? Since we first went to Sunday school, all of us, we know the story. He said, we're going to have our lives. At the end of our life, we're going to go, it's going to be Judgment Day. We're going to stand before God, and God is going to say, depending on what you did or what you believed, whatever, you're either going to heaven or to hell for all eternity. That sounds like a judgment. And what does the Bible say about judgment? Well, it depends on where you read, because it says a lot of things about a lot of things. But in the Old Testament, God tends to be somewhat judgmental. But in the New Testament, it says, judge not, lest ye be judged. For with whatever judgment you judge, you shall be judged. That's kind of telling us not to judge. So if God is telling us not to judge and he's judging us, what happened to the leadership by example idea? I'm like, I don't understand. What's going on here? You know, I came to Unity and I heard the strangest thing I ever heard in my life. It said, God neither punishes nor rewards. What? God neither punishes nor rewards. It says, sin is its own punishment and virtue is its own reward. Wow. You know, one of the things we say in Unity is spirituality for grown-ups, because that's really having to take on responsibility. It really is responsibility. And it sounds odd when I first heard that God neither punishes for rewards, but when I put it in the context of we being free agents, created in the image and likeness of God, and have creative power and free will, then that is consistent with being masters of our own fate, captains of our own ship, as we say. So what about evil? Evil. That is the classic one. It has boggled all theologians from the beginning of time. What do we do about evil? Because if God is all-powerful, and that's all there is, as I've said before, if God is everywhere, all-powerful, and then all-knowing, then I sometimes say, the question is not what is God, the question is what is not God. Everything is. So if that's true, where does evil fall into this picture? Wow. Again, when it came to Unity, I heard different things, a couple of them. One, that Unity takes the approach that evil is not something, that it is a lack of something. Something like darkness is not something, but the absence of light. And if you walk into a dark room and turn on the light, does the light need to battle with the darkness to take over? No. The darkness immediately disappears, because in the presence of light, there is no darkness. So in the presence of God, there is no evil. I said, wow, God does not know evil. It can't. So where does it come from? Well, the second idea is that the combination of that we are these free agents with creative power. And as Reverend Smith in that first book we talked about, Integral Christianity, says we are baby divinities. So if we're baby divinities, then we're kind of still noodling around with this creative power that we have, and we have not mastered it. Therefore, evil could be seen as a misuse of power. We created evil in this world, not together in our consciousness. And it still baffles me. All these movies, all these videos, everything's about killing and stuff. Is it really? Do we need to perpetuate this? Really? I don't like any of that stuff, but that's just me personally. So that would be the explanation. Is it correct? Well, I hope so. Is it a step in the right direction? I definitely like to think it is. But so until my consciousness finds a better explanation, I'm going to go with the idea that we made it. We have creative power, and we made a mess. And it's our job to fix it, our own job. I remain open to all possibilities. Now, so far I've talked mostly about God, and it seems like God thinks everything's about him, you know. But, and guess what? It kind of is. No, I'm kidding. But as I said, there were 79 different topics in the book. I'm going to leave you with like another quick couple and just kind of move on. And the first one is the Bible. And the Bible is something interesting. When I first came to Unity, I'm a Catholic too, whoever said because I was Catholic. When I first came to the Bible, I wanted to make sense of my Christian upbringing, but yet this new way of looking at things. And so the Bible, had told me, well, the Bible represents our spiritual journey of everyone's, not mine. As I like to say, if the Bible is literal, then it is about some people. But if the Bible is allegory, then it is about all people. It is about me, it's about you. So the story is that the Bible represents our spiritual journey from whatever it started or whatever it was, through all the stages of unfolding that we have gone through, from the Adam man, we call it the Adam man, the Adam consciousness. And by the way, Adam is not a man. I don't know if you realize that. In Hebrew, Adam is mankind. There is no proper name of Adam in Hebrew. And so from the creation or the beginning of mankind to what we say when we reach the awareness, the birth of that Christ consciousness that we call in unity within us. And that's coming up in Christmas. And so we'll be talking more about that in the Advent season. And I already got my little Advent booklets, so not too early to pass them out yet, but I got them already. So it represents the spiritual journey. And I said, well, that's very interesting until we get to this point where, again, we become aware that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think that's where a lot of us are right now. We're coming to a new understanding of just what and who we are. So another topic is heaven and hell. Ooh, another interesting one. Growing up, it's like, are there really places, heaven and hell? You know, the fundamentals, the traditional people actually believe that. Like, where is it? Is that on another planet or something? Where is it if there is such a place? And of course, that's the invention of a consciousness from long, long ago who believed in these things. But we don't see things that way. In Unity, we say both heaven and hell are states of consciousness. There are levels of awareness. You can have either heaven or hell right here and right now by your awareness, by your consciousness. And with the emergence of quantum physics, we're beginning to understand that that's true. That in fact, everything is nothing but energy. And so depending on where you are, that's the experience that you are having. And in fact, all our lives are expressions of our consciousness, as I said before. And as we continue to unfold, somebody was asking me, but what happens after? Well, you continue to experience higher and higher realms of understanding is what I would say. I mean, and that's basically, what else would there be? There's one other final one that I want to mention, because this is a big one, a big difference. Jesus. Wow. Was Jesus the only begotten Son of God who came and died for the sins of the world? Is that what's going on? In Unity, we say that Jesus is the great example, not the great exception. You think about that. The great example, not the great exception, because he himself told us that what he did, that we could all do. Now, that is consistent with the idea that we are all one, and that's another big difference in Unity. We teach oneness, that we are all fundamentally one. And again, if God is everywhere, then how else could it be? It's really very, very simple. And I'll continue to talk about different ideas as we proceed forward. But for now, that's speaking unity. And I'm going to invite you to just take a moment now to take a deep breath and just turn your focus inward and contemplate some of these ideas, these profound thoughts and ideas that we have shared today. We are so grateful to be part of this wonderful and thriving spiritual community. We give thanks for the opportunity to come by every Sunday to come together and share in this vibration that is love that we share here on Sunday mornings. And we know that if God is love, then that's all there is love. And any other thing to the contrary is not something that God created. It's something that we created. And it's something that we can change. And so we remain ever open and receptive to new ideas and new ways to better express the love of God on this planet. And so it is.